Hello, welcome. I'm the professor, Dr. Chris McCusker, and this is another episode in the Quarantine Management Institute where we are learning to lead in new ways together. This episode concerns problems. We have a little four-part sequence here on renewal, which began with an episode on ethical wisdom. Ethical wisdom is convergence between methods of ethics, finding a course of or creating a course of action that looks good from the point of view of egoism, utilitarianism, and is consistent with our moral intuition. That was followed by an episode introducing the concept of renewal. Renewal is a stage in a crisis, the fourth stage, the final stage. After pre-crisis survival and recovery, we have renewal. Renewal is about finding a way to express our values and create ethical wisdom in a post-crisis environment. We want to create wise solutions to problems that are identified during the crisis. This episode concerns problems. I want to share some views on what some of the problems might be in our society that have been revealed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is just an opening comment. There obviously will be more thought given to this by myself as well as others, but the idea is that we need to start to set problems. Problem setting is very important, and it comes before problem solving. In the final episode in this four-part sequence, we will look at creating a process, designing a process to lead renewal itself. So, let me tell a story first. I was in Whole Foods the other day, and I'm everywhere. I'm at Aldi, I'm at Walmart, I'm at bougie Walmart, Target. I'm everywhere shopping, but I was in Whole Foods and I was looking for some bread. I wanted some really good bread. And I walked over to the area where the bread was on display, and it seemed kind of sparse. I thought there should be more bread than that in a big store. So I asked the woman who was working in the area of the bread, I said, "Excuse me, is there anywhere else I can find more bread?" And she said, "Right over there, sir." And I said, "Thank you, babe." Now, it just came out. Having lived in New Orleans 16 years, much of it spent at Tulane University, which is a different meme, a different persona. But a lot of my time was spent in the community. I have friends, family all over town, and I've been to many barbecues and hanging out with the folks who live in New Orleans, who are from New Orleans. You pick up certain vernacular. And one of the things that we say in New Orleans is babe. So even if I'm walking down Bourbon Street with my hot dog cart, bouncers, men at different establishments will say, "Hey, professor, what's up, baby?" It's just something we say, baby. We say it almost without thinking. And for some reason, in the Whole Foods, when she gave me that direction, I said, "Thank you, babe." It just came out, baby. And she went off. I mean, it was like the Me Too movement hits vernacular in the city of Chicago. I mean, she actually said, "Baby? Who do you think you're talking to? I'm not your baby." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I started to explain that was just a habit. It's a mistake. But she cut me off and called me an ice hole. Something very similar to an ice hole. And I said, "Okay, look, I'm sorry," and walked away. And it occurred to me that she assumed that I said, "Thank you, baby," because I'm a bad person. In social psychology, we have a phenomenon which is known as the fundamental error of attribution. Attribution is a process of assigning cause to somebody's behavior. And you basically have two sources. If I'm walking down the sidewalk and I trip and fall, you say, "Why did this guy fall?" One reason is that he's clumsy. He's not a very coordinated individual. Another reason is that the sidewalk had a kind of a pothole in it, was jutting up, and he didn't notice, and he fell. So you have some sources of cause that are about the person, other sources of cause that are about the environment, the circumstances. So one thing we have to try to figure out when we're setting problems in response to COVID-19 is what caused those outcomes. Why do we see certain outcomes that we see? And I'm not going to be able to address all of that. I'm just sharing thoughts about possible problems right now. But one thing we want to avoid is assuming that the problems are the result of character or personality or individuals. Mostly, we want to avoid the fundamental attribution error, which is to assign cause to the individual rather than examining the influence of a situation. Now, I was going to try to explain to this really hardworking young lady that I am sorry. I was living in New Orleans 16 years. That's how we talked down there. I didn't mean any disrespect. But she was so convinced that I was an ice hole that I just left it alone. I left it alone. Now, I have daughters, sisters, my mother. I mean, I don't disrespect women. And I know she feels that way. But she assigned cause to me, the person. This guy came in here, and because he's an ice hole, he disrespected me. And I would argue what explains my behavior are the circumstances, the experience, namely, of having lived in a place where people say, baby. At any rate, the fundamental attribution error is to assume that cause comes from personal factors like personality and character rather than situational factors like circumstances. And I think when we examine outcomes and we think about problems, we want to probably look at both, but it's probably more respectful to start with circumstances. What circumstances gave rise to this problem? So let's start. I have a list of problems here, just brainstorming, and others can share their views. But this is what I perceive are as some of the problems that are revealed during this COVID-19 pandemic. The first is PPE. I never heard of PPE. And masks, like I have now, but I did not know where to even begin to look for a mask. I guess we can make them, but really, myself and the rest of society here in the United States were really unprepared for getting ourselves safe by wearing masks. Masks are very important, for example, and we weren't ready. I think moving forward should all have a ample supply of PPE available somewhere tucked away in storage. Another thing is food. I'm not someone who ever experienced food insecurity or scarcity. I'm very fortunate as a person. But there was a time when it wasn't clear whether you can even go outside. And you're looking at these empty shelves thinking, I'm used to ordering food, and I don't even know how many pots and pans I have. I think it's probably the case that we want to be prepared to be isolated in quarantine for months with no need to go to the grocery store. So to me, another problem on a personal level identified by this pandemic is the need to have food storage. And plenty of food, 6 months, a year, 3 months, something, so that in the worst case scenario, if there's some horrible thing happening where you can't go outside without getting sick, we can stay inside and live. Lack of planning. This is what Nicholas Taleb called a black swan event. A black swan is a rare event that's highly consequential. We don't see it coming. It's unanticipated, and there it is, a black swan. We seem to not be able to plan well for these types of catastrophic, impactful, rare, unforeseen types of events. And maybe we should spend time thinking about what are the possible catastrophic events which might occur, and what would we need to be prepared for them? How do we get one step ahead? Number 4, children. I think we've managed to terrify our children in the United States. When I think children see parents dealing with uncertainty and stress, it causes them tremendous stress. I remember as a kid, we used to spy on my mom and dad, hiding behind furniture to listen to what they were saying. Our kids are paying attention to us, and I think there have been some articles I've read about how children are experiencing a lot of anxiety. We have to find a way to protect our children from these types of catastrophic situations, these crisis situations. We don't want terrified children. I had a beautiful childhood, and that's something I wish for every child on earth. We also need to think about our elderly. Specific policies to protect our elderly. We don't have anything tailored specifically to elderly. I mean, basically everybody stay home and wear PPE if you go out. But maybe there's a need for that. In New Orleans, when the crisis first started to come into focus, there were nursing homes where there was just a rampage of the COVID-19 virus through the nursing homes, and many people died. We need to be one step ahead of it for our seniors. It seems that we've got bad outcomes when it comes to seniors. The poor and immigrants generally have received terrible outcomes. Maybe there is a need also for specific policies to help and to address the needs of the poor and immigrants. Race in the United States continues to be a catastrophic issue with unacceptable outcomes. A much higher percentage of African American people and also Hispanic people are dying from COVID-19. We need to identify that outcome and take it seriously and try to figure out what happened and why, and try to take steps to address that. I think most of us would agree. Government. What? I mean, we have a couple things that seem to be going on with government. One is the incapacity to act. Even though most of our interests are in common, we are riddled with partisan politics, even in the midst of a survival stage of a crisis. We can't get over ourselves and get past the partisanship. We must do that. We must pay attention and hold accountable people who were too partisan during this crisis. We're all in this boat together. We have to overcome those differences and focus on our common interests and take action. The government, I feel, has kind of let us down a little bit. I'm not trying to blame, and I think there's plenty of blame on both sides when it comes to overly partisan politics. And then it also seems in some things I'm reading to have been hollowed out. The incapacity to act, the scarcity of resources in some area of our government seems to be an issue as well. There is, I think, a need to look out for folks who are told you have to go home, you can't work, and your rent is due, and you're going to be evicted if you don't pay it. We have to look out for people. We don't want to throw people in the street when, through no fault of their own, they can't make their payment. And then we also have to look out for landlords. You're not getting the money that you're supposed to get to pay your mortgage, and there's no help for you. Maybe there has to be a forbearance built into mortgages that says in any crisis situation we can get a 3-month forbearance and put it at the end of the mortgage to do something to help landlords and also tenants. It seems also that we have to learn from other countries. I'm a proud American. I'm here talking about problems not because I don't love my country. I love my country. But we have to recognize that we have not distinguished ourselves in response to this crisis. We are the most affluent country in the history of the world. We are leaders in every area: politics, economics, social, influence, technology, legal. We are leaders in the world, and we need to recognize that we have not led in this situation. And we can learn from other people. We got to be humble enough to say, look, we need to learn from Hong Kong or New Zealand or places that really South Korea did a great job in managing this pandemic. We also have seemed to alienated our allies. You know, for decades, NATO was a strong alliance. We have allies in this world that we do not need to alienate in a crisis situation. We need to come together and lead the coalition of allies. And then lastly, I'll conclude with medical expertise and authority. It seems that we have this one guy, Fauci, and you know, I respect Fauci. Fauci is I think, doing an amazing job. But he's one guy, you know, and we need maybe a committee that's already in place of credible medical experts who, in this kind of situation, can give us guidance that nobody can argue with. So when you got one guy who's saying something, and even though he may be very well right, and people are disagreeing with him, and we're getting mixed messages, Then we have people protesting in the streets. We have people out there with no masks on. We have people who are not social distancing. We need credible medical experts who are trusted and who are an authority on the subject. We can't expect the President of the United States to be a medical expert, but we can expect the President of the United States to defer to a pre-established committee of medical experts who we must listen to, because we all agree that these are the folks who know what they're talking about on this issue. Problems. We got problems, baby. We got problems. Let's continue to set those problems and think about those problems. And moving forward, hopefully, we'll come up with wise solutions to those problems.